This is a short video about space science. First of all, space science itself exists. It looks at types of spaces, traits of spaces, evolution dynamics among types of spaces, operators on spaces, web spaces, imaginal spaces, time spaces. It's far beyond architecture. You have idea spaces, you have social spaces, you have mathematical spaces, you have Hausdorff spaces in mathematics. Number two, City-fication operators. These are the operations by which we turn wildernesses and new places into homes and offices for ourselves. What do we do to them in order to turn them into homes and offices we're comfortable in? That's called city-fication operators. It's interesting because some of these operators take a month or a day to execute. Others take a year or 5 years to execute. Others take 3 or 4 generations to execute. Then there's gaming science, not game theory, but gaming theory. And this is the ecstatic flow of operating with all dimensions of your abilities slightly beyond their comfort zone, so you're growing everywhere. What Csikszentmihalyi called flow experience, the ecstasy of being slightly beyond full engagement. Too much engagement and you're overwhelmed and you give up. Too little engagement and you're not growing. So there's this real sensitive point where you're slightly beyond your comfort zone and keeping up still, but only keeping up only via growing and permanently increasing your capabilities. And that's a thrill and an ecstasy for people. And games like video games and corporate games like monkey hierarchies in big organizations, they thrive if they're going to keep their best people by being interesting gaming spaces, not game spaces. Where that flow of super engagement exists for most of the people in the organization. It takes genius, absolute genius, to aim for that and to attain it. Performance science. This is the various kinds of performance: theater performance, leadership performance, employee performance, career performance, religious conversion and transfiguration performances. They share some dynamics, they distinguish certain dynamics. But it's only very recently that anyone has actually taken all the different kinds of performance that there are. Did you make your numbers? Did you thrill me? Did you reach ecstasy while performing? Did I reach ecstasy while viewing the performance? Did you take me out of the world that I'm in and release me from the anthropological straits of being born in a particular culture? Did you get me beyond those constraints of culture? Or the ontological constraints of being on the planet Earth in the way humans are constituted? Did you get me beyond the limits of being born? Then there's happiness and well-being science. This is recently a big trend in the media, so it's going to not be interesting soon because of all the noise and junk that's said about it and written about it. But happiness and well-being science is best looked at by Davidson's work at Wisconsin with Tibetan and Dar es Salaam Buddhist meditation by monks, and that seemed to, by meditating on compassion, have a happiness set point higher than anybody else he measured. It looks like you can increase your happiness set point, but in order to do it, you have to no longer be a self at all and overcome, not only be educated, and that is, be beyond your initial factory settings on the earth, but also be beyond the limits of all your culture and the earth itself. Using arts to manage emotion. This is the 64 purposes of all arts, and using and deploying mixtures of them in order to manage emotions in actual situations. Design and creation spaces. This is designing and creating spaces and the spaces in which people design and create. And this interesting loop that people use their mental flexibility and breadth of association to create myriad little tools that accumulate to make them immensely productive and expand the mental fluency and associative breadth they're capable of, so they invent even better tools that then even more expand, etc. That's game and creation space, design and creation spaces. And finally, we have what's called the game simulation work continuum, where you can start with work systems, and by removing pieces of reality end up with simulations of work systems, and by removing more reality, end up with game and fantasy game systems, and by removing even more reality, end up with fantasy systems. Similarly, you can take fantasy worlds, and by adding bits of reality, get to gaming worlds, and by adding bits of reality, get to simulated worlds, and by adding bits of reality, get to into actual work systems. But managing them all as if they were continuous is very different than doing them separately. So these are 8 space sciences, or sub-sciences within a new overall science of space. And then, space science includes the fact that these 8 spaces can be shared intellectual spaces where creativity happens, because you reach idea plasmas and social fusion, people beyond ego and ideas beyond source interacting.